Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. In your experience, what's the most memorable instance of a "you have no power here" moment? Part 3. One of my jobs is in a hotel/restaurant/bar. After being turned away from our sister hotel across the street, a patron entered the bar. Due to his extreme inebriation, he had been unkind, violent, and menacing to the employees. He insisted that we treat him like a guest, but our sister hotel had already called to inform us of the circumstances. We declined, but we did offer him some water and advised him to go upstairs to his room. He continued by saying that he had almost purchased our hotel and that, as such, we were essentially under his command and that, if we didn't serve him, he would fire us. We declined. He claimed to be a very wealthy man who would give us hundreds of pounds as gratuities if we catered to him. We declined. We again advised him to get some water and go upstairs to his room because he was becoming abusive at this point. He continued by telling us that since his brother was the mayor, we ought to assist him. We told him to go back up to his room after refusing. He went on to say that he was headed to the bar across the street, but our town's bars and restaurants all have a "barred from one, barred from them all" mantra. We called the other bars to let them know what was going on. When many of them contacted us again, they told us about the mayor's story and said they had received threats of losing their jobs in addition to money offers. Every bar remained steadfast in their refusal to serve him. He eventually returned to the hotel and made his way to his room. When my wife and I worked for the same company in separate branches, it was company policy to keep family members apart to prevent collusion because we handled a lot of cash. We had to deal with a lot of nasty people, and we frequently turned away customers. Typically, we would observe their residence and notify neighboring branches in case there was an intruder. Sadly, nothing out of the ordinary. I was the branch manager there, so I'm working there now. Although our district manager lived out of province, he was actually employed by 2 different districts, the larger of which was ours. He ultimately continued to work from my branch for his local office, and he was fortunately here today. When my wife calls, she tells me about a very unkind customer who was turned away from a business for whatever reason, completely legitimate and one that I would have refused to accept myself. The customer loses it and starts screaming and yelling. She finally walks to her car, gets her ashtray, and dumps it on the lobby floor. Could you really believe it? I get a customer in my store not 10 minutes later, and she starts babbling about this woman at the other branch right away. I smiled the entire time as I allowed her to babble about my wife for 5 or 6 minutes. My DM has also been informed of what was happening, so I could hear him loitering around the corner behind me. When she eventually stops screaming, I give her a direct look, maintain a smile, and say, "Ma'am, that woman at the other branch is my wife," using my best customer service voice possible. She turns as pale as a ghost right away. When DM could take it no more, he bursts into fits of laughter. The customer expresses her desire to speak with a manager. I responded that she was welcome to do so, but that she could also conveniently speak with my boss here. "Ma'am, it would be best if you visited one of our competitors, as we will no longer be able to serve you here," he says as he turns the corner. She starts ranting right away, saying that we couldn't do that because we owed her, that she was a customer, and that she had a right to be here. My supervisor gently warned her that if she persisted in her behavior, he would get in touch with our rivals and let them know about her attitude. She was unaware that because our industry was so small, managers from different companies had a tendency to know one another from previous collaborations. About a year later, I was employed by the next big rival. Sure enough, she'd managed to get herself banned from there too. In Iceland, I work for a small design firm. One morning, my boss enters the office grinning. An old client of his, a hotshot UK guy who is now living in Iceland, henceforth referred to as the Dude, had gotten in touch with him and wanted to work with him on a new project. The problem was that since my boss had worked for him a year prior, he had not paid me a single cent. He dismissed this when it was brought up and then began to discuss possible payments for equipment, a new computer, and other things. Radio silence for a while. In the end, though, the dude would unfairly profit from doing that because the costs are tax deductible. No one answered when my boss tried to call him back. Iceland is a small country, so he didn't have an address or any other way to get in touch with the guy. He knew someone who found the man's wife's address online and showed up at their house. After the guy answered, he turned white as a sheet, and my boss threatened to ensure that no one in the nation would ever work with him again unless he received payment in full before the end of the day. My boss is highly esteemed and well-connected in the community of designers and developers. Before the end of the day, he received his full payment. When my boss arrived at work the following morning, he smiled and took out a brand new laptop from his bag. He could write it off as a tax deduction and still have extra money to spare. In the Army, I flew an MH-47G Chinook helicopter as the crew chief. Some guys from the regular Army were getting ready to jump out of the back while strapped to a static line as we practiced for an upcoming mission. That day's weather wasn't great, and we'd already experienced multiple delays and being pushed to the right. Colonel Fulbird joins the conversation and queries why his soldiers aren't jumping. While it is technically legal to jump in the weather at the jump site, it's not legal to fly at the airfield, according to the pilot in command, a Chief Warrant Officer 3. CW3, by the way, is a much lower rank than an 06 COL in the Army, partly cloudy and windy. The weather continues to be bad and doesn't get any better. We have been seated on the APU for more than 60 minutes. When it appears that the weather may be improving, the pilots turn on the engine, spinning the blades. We prepare to taxi after loading the paratroopers onto the aircraft. Following our before takeoff checks, we hover power checks and taxi up to the hover pads. The weather's gotten worse, according to the tower's updated forecast over the radio. After landing, the pilot talks about it for a while. Despite having a headset plugged in, the colonel was unable to communicate via the ICS. He's furious about everything. When he eventually figured out how to press the talk button, which is the only button on the cord, he asks angrily what's holding him up. Pilot, we're nearing the end of our duty day, sir. The weather's gotten worse. It appears the flight will need to be canceled. Colonel, you're crazy! We won't be prepared for insert some training mission they were scheduled to attend if I don't get these troopers qualified tonight. Right now, I need you to take off. I'll take every chance. Pilot, we're not taking off tonight, sir. I apologize. Colonel, I am directly ordering you to take off, Mr. Peterson. I'll take the chance. You must take off right now. Pilot, you do indeed outrank me, sir. I'll launch, but if I think it's unsafe afterward, we'll have to call off the mission. Colonel, comprehensive. After reaching a 5-foot hover, the pilot turns to face the colonel and says, Sir, we're going back to parking because it's unsafe. I may be the pilot in command of this aircraft, but you may be my superior on the ground. You can speak with my boss if you disagree with my decision. We return to the parking lot in a taxi. The colonel is enraged. As soon as the ramp descends, he storms off the plane. Our CDR fully supported him. At JBLM, the pilot turns into something of a folk hero. After that, he didn't have to purchase drinks for a whole month. When flying in someone else's aircraft, your rank means nothing. Do you have a story about your most unpleasant neighbor or homeowners association HOA? Part 3. In our 55-plus HOA community, individuals over the age of 18 are permitted to live with a 55-plus family member or other senior if a permission form from a therapist or other similar source is presented. This has been quite the bombshell because we weren't informed that this would occur when we moved in. Buying the house was my dad's responsibility. He chose to purchase it because he liked the house in the neighborhood. Dad didn't give the HOA much thought because the realtor selling the house didn't know about its regulations, and we reasoned that perhaps they were reasonable people. About a year ago, we moved in. I'm 19. After discovering a set of misplaced keys on the ground, I made the moral decision to give them back to the community center. Big mistake occurred when the HOA manager asked me, "Is your dad with you?" before even allowing me to enter. I handed her the keys and walked away. As I was leaving, I could see her staring at me through the glass door. After that, I shunned that location like the plague. I prefer to walk alone, only leaving the community to walk outside the walls because it helps me decompress. However, while my dad and sister were heading to the gym, the HOA informed him that someone had reported me walking alone outside, so I'm now required to walk with my dad at all times. I'm a legal adult, not 12. This has caused me great distress. I live with my dad only because of my mental health issues. Since walking helps my mental health a little bit more than staying at home, I've been trying to go for walks, but it seems like my dad has to go with me these days. I walk by myself because after our fight the previous week, I find that it's a safe place. I'm sorry my dad purchased this home. I'm ready to move out, feeling confined. End of rant. Edit. After asking around, the reason is because I'm still a guest there. They only allow people 55 plus to be true residents. Thus, they have the legal right to treat me differently because of my age. What a sad, sad life, totally keeping the community safe. Not able to live there as a true resident. My coworker happens to be on the board of his HOA. He was grandfathered in because no one really participated in the neighborhood elections, which eventually became a part of the process, and the position kind of fell into his lap rather than through a formal election process. The president, in particular, despises him the most because he attempts to be a voice of reason. She attempted, for instance, to disobey the advice of the hired attorneys and violate the ADA FHA by refusing a disabled homeowner's request for an extension of their driveway. He serves as a kind of vigilante against ignorance, but that's a different tale. In any case, he saw that there has been a 25-day wait for a response to a request for a backyard pool. They have 30 days. The vendor was starting to arrange supplies at the house in preparation for the install, which the president had observed. She determined that sending a cease and desist letter to the homeowner was the best line of action. Even though it's outside of his jurisdiction because he isn't on the architectural board, my coworker pushed back, asking, "Why don't you just approve it instead?" It takes 5 minutes to be exact. There aren't many requirements, and the homeowner's proposal complies with them all. It's also not negotiable because 10 or so other homeowners already had pools of a similar design. They should choose the easiest path with their neighbor rather than a more time-consuming, difficult, and pointless one, and this kind of thing shouldn't take the full 30 days. The president wasn't too fond of this, but in the end, common sense won out. Fortunately, things didn't get too out of hand, but I thought the story would be interesting for everyone. The HOA for a 200-home community in Virginia is merely a year or so old, and from the start, this one guy has wanted to be president. He asked for proxy votes from everyone he knocked on when he first moved in. When no one answered the door, he left flyers. After gaining the presidency in the end, he implemented radical changes right away. Fired the previous management firm and hired a new one, recruited a fresh HOA lawyer, posted signs warning people not to use ATVs in the neighborhood. All 4 of the other board members agreed. It appeared fine, but things are becoming bad. Negativity will not be tolerated by this president. He will mute and boot people during community Zoom meetings when ordinary members are permitted to speak, despite the HOA rules clearly stating that they will never do so. The president intends to send out emails to all members of the community highlighting the complaints of 1 or 2 homeowners and threatening legal action. It's really nasty and trivial. Everyone can join our Facebook group, but posts that become too contentious are frequently removed by the administrator. Additionally, there is a special assistant spy working for the president who prints the posts and brings them to his residence. Thus, the president observes the group without taking part in it, feels gross, and prevents some people from ever speaking. The new management firm is dubious. She's the only performer, and she makes terrible spelling and grammar mistakes in the email she sends out, including violation notices. Keep your trash bins out of the site. No extensions. Furthermore, she never responds to questions. Instead, she simply writes everything down on the board. Everyone has access to the HOA website where they can read, post, and respond to items. After a homeowner made a critical post about the board president, he was unable to log into the website. He is simply told, "Oh, sorry, we'll look into it," by the management company. One homeowner made the decision to pen all of his grievances about the HOA in a handwritten letter, which he delivered to every home but the president's and board members' homes. He begged for our help and urged us to pull off a coup to remove the HOA board in the letter. In addition, he started a general chat group and invited everyone to join and participate. Every homeowner agreed with his proposal. And now that we've all brought a lawyer, whom we completely disregarded, to the HOA meeting, we're all armed. I'll give you the short version of the story to save you time. Both the board and president were removed. This is a triumph. The very landlord who first brought us together is leading a new board that's searching for a good management company and trying to increase HOA transparency. As of right now, anyone can post comments and wishes on the Country Needs a Facebook page. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. Very, very glad to see you all in the comments again, and many thanks for support.